Smart Provisioning. In this nugget, we are going to review a new product from Checkpoint known as Smart Provisioning. And inside of the R70 CCSE update, we're going to look at how to deploy this product. So the first few things we're going to see in this particular nugget, we're going to look at our actual firewall object settings, exactly how to turn on the provisioning options. We're going to look at building our provisioning profiles in order to get our settings set up that we want to deploy to multiple firewalls. We got to have a provisioning profile for that. We're going to basically walk through and review all the smart provisioning GUI settings and all the different options that we have inside of the smart provisioning GUI. And then we're going to actually deploy our firewall settings that we want to deploy in a kind of a mock installation. Let's say, for example, we had 100 firewalls. We could deploy all these settings using the smart provisioning software. So let's continue on from here and check out smart provisioning. Hello everyone, let's discuss a new product from Checkpoint known as Smart Provisioning. Now, Smart Provisioning is going to be the product from Checkpoint that allows you to manage a large number of firewalls from a central location. Let's say, for example, you're a large financial or hospital or some type of chain that has many locations, and maybe you have some of the small Checkpoint Edge boxes deployed at those locations to provide local internet access, as well as maybe a point-to-point VPN back to your corporate office. Now, we all know manually configuring each one of those little firewalls or medium-sized firewalls can get quite tedious, and it takes up a lot of resources for a network security staff in general. And that's where this product called Smart Provisioning kind of grew out of, was a growing need of customers out there saying to Checkpoint, saying, yeah, we like the solutions that we have in place, but managing those particular solutions is quite a nightmare just for initial configuration and get them shipped to the site. That alone is, takes us 6 months, and by the time we get our upgrade complete, it's time to do it again. So that's the whole basis behind a product called Smart Provisioning, which grew out of a product known as Smart LSM. And typically what you saw is a lot of retail locations that were using the smaller Checkpoint Edge devices as well as the Unified Threat Management boxes. And they needed something to be able to manage and to be able to set these firewalls up in a really quick fashion that made it really easy to manage them. And this is just a really cool product. I think you're really going to enjoy Smart Provisioning. And if you find yourself where you need to deploy a large number of firewalls, let's dive in so you'll have the skills that you need to know, as well as to cover your objectives for your CCSE on R70. So the first thing I want to show you guys is I went ahead and upgraded my R70 smart dashboard and my smart console and my smart management server and all that good stuff to R70.40. This is the latest patch from Checkpoint that was released in about June or between June and August of 2010 here. But this has all the latest patches and everything. I just want to make sure we're on the latest code before we dive in here. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and open up our smart dashboard here, and let's go ahead and log in. So what I had to do in order to be able to show everything to you the way I want to is I went ahead and just set up as a very vanilla management server with the same IP as our current Nugget management server. It's just 10.20.1.20. Now we're going to go ahead and log in here, and it'll just take a second for it to authenticate and log us in to the management server. Now once we get into the management server, we're going to review a few things, and then we will dive into what we need to do to get our smart provisioning working. So as you can see, our security rule that we're using is just pretty much wide open, and this is just for a overall demonstration of how to use smart provisioning. So I really haven't locked this down to corporate standards for this firewall profile. This is more of a show you how to use the products, and that way you'll be comfortable with the application known as smart provisioning. So what we're going to do at this point is there's a couple bases we need to cover in order to get smart provisioning working. So we're going to open up the Checkpoint tab here, and we're going to open up this Nugget Management tab. Now under the Nugget Management tab, whenever you install the actual R70.30 or 40 application, I believe 30 is going to automatically turn on provisioning for you. And if you have a license to use smart provisioning, you can use this a great piece of software to allow you to provision firewalls. So as you can see, we can't really modify that, but if we had a patch on R70 or higher for smart provisioning, they actually came out with R65.40 is where our smart provisioning kind of took off from. So if you're on R70 up to the latest R70.40, you can use smart provisioning as well. But the main thing is to make sure that's selected on your management server. And once we have that selected on the management server, the next thing I want to take you into is there's some actual administrator accounts and some permission profiles and some different things that you have the ability to control, and I want to show you that. So if we go to manage, and under manage we have the option for permission profiles. Now I went ahead and created a permission profile here called test. Now on this test profile, if we click edit here, we can see it pretty much looks like a basic permission profile that's going to allow you to control who can log into what on your system. Now we can see we're going to allow access via management portal and smart console applications. We can turn on read and write for all for permissions, or we can use a customized. So what we're going to do is select customize, we're going to select edit. Now as we can see here, we get a whole lot more options. We have read only, read write, and all the different options on this side here. You can see that smart update is kind of grayed out, and we'll get to that in a few minutes and talk about where some of those things are being pulled over into provisioning. But we pretty much see all the products here. We see our smart LSM, gateway information, IPS exceptions, QoS policy, monitoring and logging. We can control those permissions as well for the Aventia products, and then for provisioning. So we can manage provisioning profiles, which we'll see in a couple minutes. That can be read and write, or that could be read only. And for both of these, it could be read or write or read only. We also have an option here to allow administrator to run a particular script when using smart provisioning. So if you wrote a particular script to do something on your checkpoint firewall, you can set that script up, and we'll see that in a couple minutes. But I wanted you to see the permissions profile first, so you can think about, if I'm going to use this application, maybe I want to lock down a certain group of my administrators from doing certain things. And maybe you want to build the provisioning profiles for them and then allow them to use those profiles to provision firewalls. So it's all about the chain of command and then exactly how do you want to control everything. So that's pretty much the overall architecture on the permissions profiles and different things like that. So we're going to go ahead and cancel off of these two. And I just want to show you that we basically just have a basic firewall that is set up called Nugget Firewall D. I went ahead and borrowed the 10.20.1.1 virtual IP from our Nugget cluster that we've talked about in the last few Nuggets in this particular series. And I applied it, that way my new test management server, the 10.21.20, could speak to this gateway and be able to route out to the internet and all that good stuff. So there's a couple of other things I wanted to show you here just before we continue. And one of the cool things and this is something that's more of part of R70.40, but it has to do with the smart provisioning information as well. Now whenever we go to add a new checkpoint object, when we choose new checkpoint security gateway, this was a new wizard that they created for this version. I just wanted you guys to see this just in case you haven't seen it already. So you can click on wizard mode and you can actually walk through and set up all of the information you want to set up for your latest firewall that you want to deploy in your environment. And it has some really nice graphics I want you to see. Basically it has like some of the power 9070 and 5070 and those different type of power 1 boxes, as well as some of the UTM ones, and it talks about open servers and all that good stuff. But this is basically a new security gateway wizard that you can walk through. So you could do either that, or you can just do the classic mode. I always prefer classic mode. It's just what I'm used to, and this is just give me the actual firewall gateway and I'll configure all the settings and set up the SIC and all that good stuff. But just wanted you to see that. Alright, so let's pause for a second. We're going to come back. We're going to dive into smart provisioning. We're going to configure everything and get you guys up to speed on what you want to know about your actual smart provisioning application. Alright guys, let's go ahead and dive in and configure our smart provisioning now that we've covered the basics, just to give us all a little bit of history on why I set everything up the way that we have it currently. So what we need to do at this point is we'll select at the top, we'll select Window, and we'll select this application known as Smart Provisioning. Now this will bring up the actual application for us, and we have a few choices here, and let's review some of these things so you guys can see that before we go any further. So right off the bat, you're going to notice that you have this overview window. I'm going to try to slide this bar down here if it'll allow me to do so. Okay, here we go. So on this actual overview window, we can see our devices that are defined. We can show what's not up to date defined, profiles defined. It'll tell you information about your actual licensing information. You have your device status information here. We have our action status that'll tell us exactly, what's gone on in the last few days and different things like that. You can control all that from this overview window. And then we see our smart provisioning wizard. Now, as we can see, it says the smart provisioning wizard allows central configuration of checkpoint devices. Settings can be managed per device or by using a provisioning profile that can be associated with many devices. So this wizard guides us through the following steps. We can choose devices. We can perform one or more of the following operations. We want to make sure that we verify R65, HFA40 or later is running on the device. We can also do fetch device configuration, and we can associate devices with a particular provisioning profile. So let's look through this. This isn't going to get us where exactly we want to be at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and select next here, and next again. And basically, if we had a provisioned box that was already set up correctly, we would have an option right here where we could walk through the wizard. Now, you can always use the wizard, that's one option, but we're going to use some other options inside of smart provisioning in order to get you completely comfortable and get the system working for us. So what we see by default here is what happened behind the scenes is it just now pretty much did a sync process between our management server and synced over the firewall known as Nugget Firewall-D. And basically what it's telling us is saying that this device is in maintenance mode right now. So let's look through a few other things, and then we're going to dive into configuring more of the profiles and different things. So if we click on profiles, we have the option right here to set up a new profile. And what this is kind of the bread and butter behind everything. The provisioning profile basically gives us the ability to control all the settings that we want to control for a firewall from this one central location. So it's a really cool option. The next thing we're going to see is devices. And we can see it basically synced everything over, and it sees our Nugget Firewall-D and our Nugget management server. It shows us the version, and it shows us that we're running secure platform. So it picked all that up on its own. And that's pretty awesome as well, so you don't have to do that. And under device configuration, we have some options under networking. We can set our DNS, we can set our routing, our interfaces, our host, domain name, host name, and we can also control exactly how do we want to back up our firewalls. All that information is controlled through smart provisioning. So as you can see, this is coming to be a very powerful type of application for us. Now, one thing I wanted to look at, which I haven't really dived into, and let's see if it's still here, because I'm seeing some things about Smart Update, and I've heard some chatter about Smart Update actually getting pulled into Smart Provisioning, but I can see it's still here for licensing and that type of information as well. And we can still do some package information. So I just wanted to check that out real quick and see if they totally took that out in the R70.40, which they haven't yet, but just wanted you to see that as well. So let's go back in. So on our provisioning profiles, we have all this information that we talked about here on the left that we can control, and then at the top we have a few buttons to review. We can do a new provisioning profile, we can edit a particular gateway, we can export to a file, we can update a corporate office gateway, we can stop a particular firewall, we can start it, we can restart it, we can reboot it. We can upgrade all the packages on a particular firewall. We can distribute a package just like we would in Smart Update. We can do a pre-install verification. We can get the gateway data. We can also do a find for a particular object. And then we can look at some default column width. We can control that if we want to change this information up right here. We have the option here for show or hide columns. So if we click that, we can control exactly what we want to see here. And that's really cool, so we can actually get a custom field on what all these columns that we want to see at the top are. And then we have an option here to go ahead and run the Smart Provisioning Wizard. So that's kind of all the GUI aspects of it. Now let's dive into setting things up and getting the actual Smart Provisioning working for us the way we would like it to be. So the first thing that we need to do is go into our profiles here. Now we have some options here at the top. Under File, we can do New. We have a new provisioning profile option. We have Edit. We can do some finds. Under View, we have just general toolbar, status bar, and status view. For Manage, we can actually select an SSH application. So that's one of the first things we're going to do here, and this is pretty cool. I want you to see this. So we're going to tell it that we're going to use PuTTY, and we're going to tell it exactly where our PuTTY lives at. So we're going to select this button right here, and then we're going to select that our PuTTY is on our desktop. We're going to open that, let it map that profile over, and we'll select OK. So we have our PuTTY application tied to Smart Provisioning, and we can automatically launch SSH sessions from this software. So that's pretty cool. You don't have to worry about typing in the IP information or anything like that. It'll do that for you. So under here, at this point, we have our Manage, Actions, Window. We can just jump around like we do on the other Checkpoint products, and we have our Help button. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go into Profiles. So we're going to do File. We're going to do New Provisioning Profile. Now, we have some types to select. We can do an IP appliance, if this is like a Nokia, IPSO-based type appliance, a UTM-1 Edge for that small office, home office, or that retail location, or we have a UTM-1, a Power 1, or Secure Platform. So that's the choice we want to do because we're using Secure Platform on open hardware. So our actual name for this policy, we're going to give it as Splat. Okay, so we'll select Next. And now we can edit the provisioning profile properties after creation. We'll go ahead and select Finish here. Now, as we can see here, we have a few options. So right off the bat, for DNS, we can manage the DNS settings locally on the device, or we can manage the DNS settings centrally from this application. So that's what we're going to do here. And we have some advanced options where it says overriding profile settings on device level is allowed, denied, or mandatory. So you can control exactly how granular you want to get with this application, saying that you have complete control, or it can be allowed to override profile settings on the device level. So definitely gives you a great amount of control overall what maybe some of your other junior administrators might be doing. So let's go ahead and hit cancel here. So under DNS, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up some DNS servers. So we're going to do 4.2.2.1, we'll do 4.2.2.2, and we'll use the last one, which is Google's, which is 8.8.8.8. So that looks great. Under host here, let's say we want to manage a particular host file to give our firewall the ability to ping something by its name. So we'll say new, and we're going to call it, let's just say management server. And what we're going to do is put in a host entry here that's going to allow us to ping over to 10.20.1.20. And let's shorten this. Let's just call it capital M, capital S for management server. Okay. Looks good there. And the same type of information is here under the advanced. And under domain name, we can manage this. We're going to set this to nuggetlab.com. So we'll control that. And under the backup, we're going to say we're going to manage this backup. We're going to say that every Monday and every Friday at 12 midnight, we want to basically back up our systems. We can also include our checkpoint log files, And under our backup target, we have the option here also where if we want to push a backup process out to 100 firewalls, so say back up your processes and then SCP that information or TFTP it back to a server at the corporate office, you can see how scalable and how great this product is, and just that alone can save you tons of time if you have a firewall go offline. You could build something from the backup at the corporate office, get the firewall completely imaged the way it needs to be, and then overnight it out to a location, have someone plug it in, and they're good to go. So, really cool option here with the backup. So we'll go ahead and just tell it locally on device for now. Go ahead and hit cancel here, and we'll select OK. So as you can see here, we have this provisioning profile, and it's selected for Splat. So the next thing that we want to do at this point is use this provisioning profile to change some of the settings on one of our firewalls. And our firewall in this case is going to be that Nugget Firewall D. Everything that we set up, we're basically going to use this application in order to push those settings out to that firewall. Now, you have the ability to do this and push this out to as many firewalls as you want. Now, one thing you're going to see here at the bottom is we have some like critical notifications. It's in the devices and maintenance mode, and basically it's just saying it doesn't see something correctly through the status window. And one thing that we can do here, we can right click here, we can click on get status details, and this is a pretty cool little readout. And what it does is it dives into the firewall and just dumps all kinds of great information for you. It tells you the current policy name, the last time it was installed, its peak connections, accepted bytes, the interfaces that are set up, the type of traffic they're getting on them, the memory statistics, the CPU information, the hard drive information, and it finishes up by saying basically that your provisioning status is okay. So if I need to push you settings through smart provisioning, I can do it. So we'll go ahead and select close on this for now. Let's pause for a second here, then we're going to come back and use this application to go ahead and provision our Nugget Firewall D with all the settings that we just set up. Alright my friends, I hope you're ready. We're going to actually use smart provisioning now to deploy some settings for us. So under our devices option right here, this was kind of tricky the first time I started messing with this software to try to figure out exactly how do I deploy what I set up in my profiles to the actual firewall. So you're starting to look up here and you're like, well, start or restart or reboot, those are kind of like power options. So how do I actually provision the software? So one thing you have to do in order to use the provisioning options is basically right click on your Nugget Firewall D. Under actions, you have some options here. You can look at package information. Just like on your smart update, you can update selected incorporate office gateway information. If this was going to be a head-in unit for maybe a point-to-point VPN between a bunch of branch offices and you were wanting to update the corporate gateway here, you could do that information as well. And under maintenance, we can stop, we can start, we can reboot, we can do all that great information. But the one thing that I want you to see here is we can launch an SSH terminal, we can launch device management portal, we can do all that type of information from one central location. So you can imagine how cool that would be if you had a couple hundred firewalls here. You would be able to basically right click on that particular firewall and launch an SSH tunnel into it, run your PuTTY information, and wham, you're into it. See, that's really cool. That alone right there makes it worth the price of admission, right? So if we go ahead and log in here, we can see that all of our basic settings and different things, and this is our Nugget Firewall D. So what we're going to do at this point, let's go ahead and get out for now, and we're going to right click on Nugget Firewall D, and we need to select Edit Gateway. Now, this is the one thing you have to do before you can even use provisioning at all. You have to tell it that you want to enable provisioning. But before we do that, let's look at packages. We can see that our information here shows all the package information about what's currently installed on our Nugget Firewall D. So we'll enable provisioning. We can tell it no provisioning profile, But we actually set up a provisioning profile, or we could put this particular firewall in maintenance mode. Let's say, for example, you were wanting to do something to the firewall and you did not want anybody to be able to make changes to the firewall while you have it in a maintenance mode. You would come into the application, right click on it, and select maintenance mode. But for us, we're going to select the drop down. We're going to choose Splat. And what it says is, in order to continue, it wants to go ahead and save our settings for our Splat provisioning profile. So we're in great shape there. So under our actual packages, we see that, we see our DNS information, and we see all this was pulled over from our profile. We have our host information, and we can tell it to use profile settings. And under DNS, that's already done. Interfaces, if you needed to set up an actual interface on a firewall and you needed to provision it, you could do that right from this application. Now host, we have the MS host that we created. We're going to push that out. Our domain name, we have our nuggetlab.com. Our host name, we can control that. Our backup information is set up the way we want it to be, where we're going to back up every Monday and Friday at 12 midnight. And any routing information, you can control that as well. So that's pretty cool information, and you can see just really how cool this particular software could be for someone who has a lot of firewalls to administer, and just why it's so useful for them. And under actions, this is where we need to click yes, and this is where we can actually do everything. We can run a particular script, we can run a backup, we can push settings and actions, we can get actual settings if we want to stop that particular gateway or start it, or basically stop and start, or basically going to be a CP stop and a CP start of the checkpoint services. We can restart the gateway, or we can issue an actual reboot of the gateway, which is kind of the same thing, but we have two options there. We can get status details, and under packages we can tell it to upgrade all packages, distribute package, do a pre-install verification, or we can get gateway data. All that from this particular packages menu. Or we can update that select your corporate office gateway option that we talked about earlier. But for now, what we want to do is push settings and actions. So we'll go ahead and push that out, hit cancel, and what we can see here is right behind the scenes here, it tells us that the action has been completed. So it's went through the option of actually pushing out the settings that we had in our provisioning profile for Splat out to our Nugget Firewall D. So what we should be able to do now is right click on that and choose Launch SSH Terminal, and let's uncheck that and let's try that again. And it always wants to ask us, so we'll click Run. So let's go ahead and log in. Alright, so one thing I want to do is try to ping MS. There we go. Pretty cool. So from that provisioning profile, we had the ability to create a host file, push that information out, set up our DNS information, set up routing, all the typical stuff that we would typically dive in and do via sysconfig. This makes it much easier to get those firewalls up and running without having to dive through the command line. Now, I'm a fair believer that you need to have command line skills and you need to harness the power of the GUI. But if the GUI makes your life 4 times easier, use the GUI. So that's pretty much what we want to see on these options. Let's look at our actual DNS options and see, did it deliver our DNS servers. So we're going to hit option number 3, and we're going to tell it to show us our configured domain name servers. And there they are. So we have our 4221, 4222, and 8.8.8.8. So we can see that the application works really well for us. It can control everything, and we can do everything that we want to do from this particular application that we would typically use, maybe use Smart Update or use the command line and using a manual putty process into one of those firewalls. So we'll go ahead and tell it to run a pre install verification, and it tells us that no relevant packages are available for this operation. So we could download packages to that particular firewall, and if we wanted to install something, we would do that type of staging via Smart Update. But we could use that as well. And that's pretty much everything we pretty much want to know about smart provisioning. There's not a lot of options there, but you can see how easy it is to configure. It's good to know exactly how to set it up, and we've ran through pretty much everything that you need to know about smart provisioning. So I do encourage you to set it up in your own home lab or in your office environment and just get comfortable with it. Start using it. Start making your life a lot easier when you're setting up your firewalls. So, like I said, smart provisioning kind of evolved over a customer request to Check Point saying, give us better management tools, and I think they did a great job and kind of knocked it out of the park on this one. Alright everyone, are you ready to install 100 firewalls? In this nugget on smart provisioning, we learned some very valuable steps and some improvements of this new product to help you install a large number of firewalls, or to just deploy settings in your own lab environment, or any firewalls that you need to deploy in your own corporate environment. And that is one of the wonderful aspects of using smart provisioning. In this particular nugget, we reviewed the actual firewall object settings, where we had to turn on our provisioning permissions in order to use the smart provisioning software. We looked at some of our provisioning profiles and some of the administration rights and different things as well. We actually did a review of all the smart provision GUI settings and exactly what each of the GUI settings can do for us. We saw that as well. And then we actually ran through and deployed some firewall settings using smart provisioning. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.